I'm back with some more BCacheFS drama. Kent, the lead maintainer over at BCacheFS, has found himself in a fiery exchange between another developer, Mikhail, specifically over a Linux kernel function. And what started as a technical discussion turned into a heated debate with some frustration from Kent, and the fallout here begins. And specifically what has happened is the Code of Conduct Committee for Linux actually told Kent that he cannot contribute his merge or patches for the 6.13 kernel. We're going to get on all this drama and how it escalated here. It's quite interesting. But first I want to cover a few things. First off, the BCacheFS updates for 6.13, because 6.13 is what the Linux Code of Conduct team decided Kent cannot contribute to, which focuses on self-healing work, some code that would check and repair the disk, just like file system check does at runtime. Reflink repair no longer deletes reflink pointers, improvements to rebalance data path option handling, and lots of other small fixes and cleanups. And for those of us who aren't familiar with BCacheFS, BCacheFS is a cow file system copy on write. For Linux-based operating systems, its primary developer here is Kent Overstreet, who first announced it in 2015, and it was added to the Linux kernel beginning with 6.7, so recently. But Kent and BCacheFS has been in many dramas, including with the creator of Linux, Linus himself, and overall butting heads with quite a few others. Anyways, why is BCacheFS important? Well, it's self-proclaimed as a modern file system that again has copy on write, like ZFS or BTRFS, full data and metadata checksumming, multiple device usage, replication, snapshots, encryption, and high performance with low tail latency. Anyways, this patch here was a no-go, and here's how it all began. After McCall had emailed over to Kent talking about the kmalloc. For those of you who don't know, kmalloc is a key memory allocation function in the Linux kernel. It is used to allocate memory dynamically in kernel space. And the argument here that it should fail and return null in the case of bugs because it's going to be an improvement with respect to system robustness in exactly the same way we don't use bug on if it's something that we can't guarantee won't happen in the wild. We warn and try to handle the error as best as we can. And this is seemingly Kent trying to explain stuff to Mikhail, who with this back and forth finally says, "I'm not your assistant to be tasked to search through lore archives. Find one if you need that." And after Kent, Mikhail basically said they've already talked about this in a different email thread and doesn't see why their method is invalid. Followed by Kent saying, "You mean I asked you for a link to the discussion and rationale you claimed that had happened? Still waiting on that." And then from Mikhail, "I am not your assistant to be tasked and search through lore archives. Find one if you need one." The straw that broke the camel's back is this particular post here, which we're going to talk about, but I also want to talk about the community sentiment here, what they thought about this exchange, and if there's fragmentation in the Linux community. Well, let's first read this. Mikhail, if you think crashing processes is an acceptable alternative to error handling, you have no business writing kernel code. Pretty big statement here made by Kent. You have been stringently arguing for one bad idea after another, calling him out again, and it's been an insult to those of us who do give a shit about writing reliable software. Wow. You're arguing against basic precepts of kernel programming. Get your head examined and get the fuck out of here with this shit. Quite some strong language and thoughts from Kent, as he's known to give many times in the past. But what's more interesting is the resolve, because Kent does do some reflection here, which quite honestly is refreshing to see. Let's get more into that, as here is where the Code of Conduct Committee steps in. Kent, the Code of Conduct Committee received reports about your conduct in an email discussion. A link to the email where the violation took place. We just read that email. Our community works on trust and respect and has agreed to abide by the Code of Conduct. Reference it here. The Code of Conduct Committee has determined that your written abuse of another community member required action on your part to repair the damage to the individual and the community. You took insufficient action to restore the community's faith in having otherwise productive technical discussion without the fear of personal attacks. Following the Code of Conduct interpretation process, the tab has approved the following recommendation. Restrict Kent Overstreet's participation in the kernel development process during the Linux 6.13 kernel development cycle, and the scope is decline all pull requests from Kent Overstreet during the Linux 6.13 kernel development cycle. And this is a situation that's a bit devastating here for Kent, because there's serious ramifications here for both the individual Kent involved, including things like a damaged reputation, breakdown of other people who want to collaborate and trust in those individuals who want to work with Kent. Of course, it has broader community impact, as the email sparked controversy even to the likes of the Conduct Committee, and that we really need to go back to adhering with kernel development culture. Anyways, I'll let you think about that one, but let's read Kent's responses, because that's where it gets even juicier. All right, Kent's response to all this is okay. Just to be clear on what this is about though, I'm going to post publicly what I wrote to Mikhail back in September. This is about a code of conduct board that on the one hand doesn't wish to follow its own rules, and on the other I can't even make sense of. Anyways, after saying this, Kent writes more in an email, which to my surprise seems like an apology. By the way, after getting emails from 3 different people about this, I do want to apologize for things getting this heated the other day. But I need to also tell you why I reacted the way I did. Firstly, it's nothing personal. I'm not axe grinding against you, although you were a major source of frustration for myself and Shuren in the memory allocation profiling discussions, and I hope you can recognize that as well. But I do take correctness issues very seriously, and I will get frosty or genuinely angry if they're being ignored or brushed aside. The reality of that experience, and to be frank, standards of professionalism do vary within the kernel community, and I have had some outrageous fights over things as silent data corruption bugs introduced in the code I wrote by people who didn't carbon copy me. No less, it was bad. And yes, it has happened more than once. As we all know, Kent has been in drama in the past, as I mentioned before. I have some other videos on this. You might want to check them out because they're just as juicy and good. And don't forget to smash that like button if you're enjoying it so far. So I am not inclined to letting things slide, even if it means being an asshole at times. Thankfully, most people aren't like that. Dave, Willie, and Linus, we can be shouting at each other, but we'll still listen, and we know how not to take it personally and focus on the technical when there's something serious going on. Usually when one of us is shouting, you'll find there's a good reason and some history behind it, even if we also recognize the need to try to tone things down and not to be too much of an asshole. Linus reminding me of that yesterday, which does shed some light on the people that were talking to him. I do appreciate this reflection from Kent's side and kind of coming around. So for the record, I'm not trying to roadblock you or anyone else. I'm just trying to make sure we all have shit that works. And I have been noticing you stepping up in discussions more, and I'd like to encourage that. If I may, has been lacking in strong technical leadership for a long time. Andrew's great on the process side. He makes sure things move along, but we haven't had anyone who's trying to keep everything important in their heads, who's able to point out to people where their work fits in the larger picture. And there's been some messy things that have built up over time. And a word on the technical leadership, it doesn't mean being the one who's right all the time, although it does involve saying a lot of no to the people who seem to be the smartest. It's not raw IQ that they've got, although that helps. It's the ability to listen and quickly incorporate other people's ideas without drama or attachment, although Ken seems to find himself in drama quite often, and the ability to maintain perspective, notice what people are blocked on, and without getting stuck on it, and think about how it fits in the wider perspective. Cheers, Kent. And that's how Kent ends this one, which is quite a surprise after all this back and forth in the email chains. I think we recognize that there's a balance between the passion and professionalism that's needed in order to conduct yourself properly in the open source projects such as the Linux kernel. There's definitely a need for respectful discourse, even when there's intense technical disagreements. I do appreciate Kent apologizing here and doing some inner reflection. I think respect and collaboration is the way to go in order to advance, and we'll see Kent back in it after kernel 6.13 gets released. Now, I do want to talk briefly about the community response. A majority of people are actually supportive of the code of conduct suspension. Even many contributors support the suspension, saying that the code of conduct is necessary to maintain a collaborative and professional environment. And the personal attacks were unprofessional, counterproductive, and this light penalty will give Kent time to reflect, as he already has. Now, of course, you have the other side calling this unnecessary and up to even moral policing. I'm not sure that that's quite where it's at. As we all know, BCacheFS and Kent's reputation of being a talented contributor who occasionally clashes with others. Let's take this as an opportunity for growth. Hopefully I won't be making another drama video like this about BCacheFS or Kent in the future. Only time will tell. Let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe below. You wouldn't want to miss Linux and programming videos like this. Catch me in a great community on Discord, and I'll catch you in another video. Thanks for watching. Linux can be hard to understand, but I take the most commonly used terms, commands, and subjects in Linux, and I break them down into simple to read documents, including Linux terms, flashcards, a checklist, a cheat sheet, and a mind map. And if you're ready to level up your Linux experience and knowledge, go to learn.savvynik.com now and get access to these sheets.